3, 2, 1, live. No, I'm just kidding. We're already live. Guys, everyone who made it out here in person, super happy to have you all here. It's super cold here in Chicago. And so we're super grateful to have you guys. For those of you joining us online, you might have made a good decision being how cold it is. But either way, we're happy that everyone can make it. Happy we could try out this new format. And super excited to have our special guest here today. My name is Jonathan Clem. I'm with Quality Builders. I'm the host of the RE Investors Meetup, and I have my other two co-hosts, Andy Smith with A&N Mortgage and Tony Freeman with RE Investors Brokerage, both in the back of the room. I couldn't probably be more excited to have our guests here today. Prashant Mahakali with PMPC Architects. He's probably been the most influential person in my own investing career, so I'm super excited to have him start out this new format. Prashant's the owner of PMPC Architects. He also is a developer with RealView Design and Development, and I think he put on 15 new construction homes in just the last year, so he's just crushing it. And so I want to just kind of start out with Prashant introducing himself and just like maybe introducing yourself and letting us know a little about who you are as a person, where you're from, why real estate, and just anything else you want to share.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jonathan. And the feeling is mutual. Jonathan has been a great guy to know and a great client and a good friend. And I'm so glad he's doing this. I'm sure, we all believe in sharing knowledge, and I'm happy to be part of this event and share whatever information I am able to and answer some questions and hopefully get you a step ahead in your real estate journey. My name is Prashant Mahakali. I am the owner of PMPC Architects. I am also a partner in a development company called RealView Design Development. We do single family homes, new construction, and on the architecture side, we do drawings for pretty much any Chicago project that's residential, about 3 or 4 stories or less. And we specialize in taking care of sticky situations, building violations, and people who are generally in trouble with the Department of Buildings, which is the favorite department in the city of Chicago. Most people hate or love to hate. So that's been where my background has been. The funny thing I'd like to share is how I got started in this business. It was 2008. My boss decided it was time to shut down. So it was just me and him. So I didn't know where to go. So I sat myself in the city hall's easy permit desk waiting area. So I would go follow clients after they get shunned by the easy permit staff. I follow them down the elevator hall and down onto the street and say, hey, do you need an architect? And they'd be like, who are you? How do you know I need an architect? And so it's been a journey. So I hustled my way through my initial career and a few clients, and then it really exploded. And we have an office, and we have about 6 people. We specialize in pulling architectural permits for residential projects. We do about 150 to 170 projects a year, all small, which is great not because it's the number, that's 150, 170 unique clientele that we deal with every year, which is very exciting for me. So that's me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll try to do my best. I have to throw the standard disclaimer. I'm trying to answer the best I can, which doesn't mean this is architectural advice. It is just advice. So please make sure to have all the information, evaluated by someone else. That could be me or another architect, but hopefully the information I give is helpful to you and, one step toward, getting that project started that you've been trying to. Okay. Excited.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to selfishly ask the first question. So one of the things we're trying to do from a development side is get into bigger deals, 5+ up to 25 units. one of the hardest things for me to still figure out is how to really determine when we can add units and which zoning, would be the best as it is to not have to kind of rezone properties.
Got it. So it's a complicated question. It's got many aspects to it. I'll try and answer the best I can. So in general, in Chicago, if you look at any building, as long as it has space that you can expand into, you should attempt doing that. What that means is, let's say I have a 3-unit building and the basement is vacant. Well, there's room for it. So can it be another unit? Sure. Does the zoning allow it by default? No. So I would still go for it and ask the alderman or the zoning attorney, what are the chances of getting this zoned to what I want to do eventually? So in your case, it's a larger building. Chicago has a ton of these super huge buildings with vacant basements, which is why this ADU program got started, which most of you are familiar with right now. There are multiple ways of value adding into these existing buildings. What you have to do is look at the base zoning, and then the City of Chicago zoning map is an open free resource. Zoom out and see if you have a bunch of zoning changes. What that means is they all don't look the same. There's like one box here with a different zoning type. That tells me that people have been successful in getting a zoning change right around that location. So it's probably worth going and checking out whether it's a zoning change eligible or not. I have to say this: when people talk about zoning changes all the time, you have to have the right story. Why the zoning change? That is the most critical part of that you have to answer to your zoning attorney. Why do you need the zoning change? And it cannot be, I want to make more money, right? There has to be a story. And, I feel like I am very creative in that aspect, because I'll spin a story, not because it's false, but there has to be a story attached to your zoning, because you'll be in front of the zoning board and they'll ask you, why should we grant you the zoning change? And you better have a good story. I have made stories as simple as, well, you can't really dig down, so I need to go up. Give me the extra floor. Or the soil condition's really bad here, so I can't really make a basement. So give me an extra floor on top. So I need a zoning change so I can add an additional unit. Or from our research, we found that this location does not have enough accessible units. So we're going to put an elevator that takes people down a single stop, and make these basement units all accessible. Right away, you spin a story that nobody can say no to, right? So have that story ready to go along with the zoning change application. And I feel you can do, if there's space, you owe it to yourself to explore the zoning change option.
Awesome. All right, next question from Joe Garb. How to go about properly certifying a basement unit and make it legal? And so I think kind of like what makes a basement unit legal, and what are the processes now? Maybe you can add on like with the ADU ordinance, like what are some of the things you're seeing and how it's working?
Got it. So basement units are very confusing. A lot of people don't know what makes a basement unit legal and what makes a basement unit not legal. I hate to use the word illegal, because a basement unit is not illegal until you get caught. Right? So you don't want to say, oh, I have an illegal basement unit. No, you don't. If you had an illegal basement unit, you're in trouble. You'd not be talking to me, right? You're already in trouble. So don't call your own units illegal, because it's a very misleading term. So call it a non-conforming unit. That is more in term with the terminology that's right, because that's what zoning department would call it. You have a non-conforming unit, but the non-conforming unit in trouble becomes an illegal unit. That's the difference. So you put a tenant in because you want to make money in a non-conforming unit. The tenant has identified something that is not up to code, called you on it, and called the city on it, and now it's become illegal because the city has cited you for it, right? So that's the difference. That's a very key difference for you to know is a non-conforming unit versus an illegal unit. An illegal unit is in trouble. You're not allowed to have it because somebody cited you for it. So having said that, a basement unit has to meet certain requirements from zoning perspective and from building code perspective. And they're totally different. And they have different rules, different standards on what is a zoning compliant basement unit and a building code compliant basement unit. So you want to evaluate it from both sides. So the question is, you basically want to know how to certify. Certification of an actual unit comes from zoning. Zoning determines how many legal number of units you have in your building and gives you which you've probably seen, a certificate of zoning compliance. That is a real estate document. It is not an official building permit document. That's very important for you to realize. Just because you have a certificate of zoning compliance from closing saying it's 4 units does not mean that you have 4 units. It just means that from their records, it just seems like it's a 4-unit building, so you can close on the property. When you come to do work on the property, they're going to look at a different set of records and you hope that it coincides and it's still a 4-unit building. So here, the certification is, do you have the minimum ceiling height? Do you have the egress figured out? Does it mean 2 means of exit? Yeah, ceiling height is 7 feet. You know, there are, again, I didn't say a number specifically because there are cases where you can get by with less than 7 feet, but you know, you also want to evaluate the quality of your housing stock, right? You don't want to just meet code and say, you know, hit your head when you walk in. You don't want to provide a substandard housing stock for your tenants. You want to have 7 feet or more, just because below that, it just becomes not a fun, livable unit, right? So there's that aspect of it. Building code is a minimum standard. If you want to exceed building code, you always want to exceed building code, right? So the ceiling height, egress, and then the standard plumbing, electrical, water service, all of that should be met. And then once you meet all of these requirements, the building department issues a building permit. And the building permit is your official proof that it's a legal unit and it is forever until you physically pull another permit to deconvert it. So the answer is a building permit is the best proof or evidence of increasing a unit and, you know, creating a legal unit forever.
Awesome. One other thing too, I want to point out that I feel like I've learned recently, when we go and submit drawings and we switch from a 3 to a 4-unit building, that building actually gets rezoned as a 4-unit building, correct? Is that a fair statement?
So the building does not get the zoning changes. If the zoning district allows a 4-unit building by right, then the 4 units are certified and it becomes a 4-unit building. So it is more to do with whether does it meet with zoning codes for that particular location. So let's say it's an RT4, you have a zoning and you have a 25 by 125 lot, you know by right you can only get 3 units, right? But then you have an RM 4.5 or RM5 zoning and have a 25 by 125. Now you can get more units by right, but you would not satisfy the parking requirement, which basically states number of units, same number of parking spots. Each parking spot in Chicago is 8 by 18 feet. On a 25-foot wide lot, you can only get 3 parking spaces. So you're restricted by right to a 3-unit building on a 25 by 125 lot, regardless of zoning, unless you're able to get a zoning variance to waive that parking requirement, right? So you want to evaluate it from multiple standpoints, different ways, but in general, when you convert from 3 to 4, there's usually a zoning change involved for a typical standard 25 by 125 lot. So you either go from RT4 to RM5, which would allow you to get that 4th unit, and then you seek a waiver for the parking.
Perfect. Awesome. I like this next question a lot and very important for investors. As a ballpark, what fee can we expect for design and permitting?
How much time do we have here? So I want to answer this in a different way, right? So what value is the architect bringing to the table? So that's what you really want, right? Fees are all over the place in general, for single family, homes, renovations and all that. You can expect anywhere between, 4,000 on the low end to like almost 8,000 or somewhere in between. And it depends, right? And that's just a number. Don't get tied to the number because the number is misleading. There are three ways of, the three things that you're looking for when hiring an architect. So the 3 E's that I call it: expertise, experience, and efficiency. So you're hiring an architect for either one or all of these 3 things, right? Experience is the most expensive. You hire a really experienced architect, you're going to pay more. You hire an expert, you're going to pay more. You hire an efficient architect, you're probably going to pay less because there's not much creativity involved there. You're just paying for a process, which is where most of the rehabs tend to be. You're not looking for the next architectural marvel. You're trying to get a permit, right? So you want to state that explicitly. I'm not looking for something creative. I don't want you to spend a lot of time. I'm looking for a building permit as an investor so that I can start the work. And when you make that expectation very explicit, the architect knows, okay, I have to be very efficient about this and churn out a permit in the least possible time. So we have processes in place to help with that. I want to call myself an efficient architect who's also experienced and also an expert, but I lead with the efficiency aspect of it because it is very relatable to investor clients.
What about permit costs?
Permit costs can vary based on, for a single family home, we've seen permits for full renovation. It is depending on the area of the building or the scope of work. In Chicago, there's a free online permit fee calculator where you can punch in numbers and answer some questions. It'll spit out an approximate permit fees, but in general, you should expect less than $1,000 for a typical residential renovation project. Once you have new construction, it increases to 3,000 plus. Once you have more units, it increases even more. So you want to have a good idea of all of this prior to when you put your pro forma together as an investor, because you don't want to say, go to an architect and say, oh, I only have 5,000 budgeted for you. That's all I can pay. It doesn't make any sense, right? Because you got that 5,000 from nowhere and there's no basis for it. So now you're trying to fit an architect who can work for that fee, and that might be difficult. So you want to do some due diligence while you're creating the pro forma for your project.
I'm going to modify this next question a little bit, but it's basically asking if you use an architect, is your permit process going to go faster and smoother? So maybe you can talk a little bit about the self-certification process and expediting process, and what makes a permit process go faster or slower.
Got it. So these are very Chicago specific questions. So I'll make sure to answer for Chicago projects and Chicago Department of Buildings. In general, architects don't like to pull permits for whatever reason, because it's just a lot of administrative stuff. I'm a little bit different because I was hired primarily because of my permit expertise, because I'm very familiar with permit process and all that. So I like, and my staff and me, we enjoy the permit process because it gives us a chance to interact with the DOB staff, and that's what we've been trained in, and we're very good at it. Now, in general, if you want to hire an architect, you want to be very clear and ask, what is the level of services you're going to provide? Are you going to give me a permit? Or are you just going to do drawings? If somebody says, I'm just going to do drawings, you have to really evaluate, your time is money. So now you have to hire another expediter to go and get a permit. It's probably not worth your time. Or it may be because some expediter might say, I'll do this work for $500 and the architect is charging $1,000 for permit expediting. So then it's a cost related decision for you. In general, if the architect performs the permit expediting themselves, it's more advantageous to you because it saves time. If there's an expediter the Expediter, there's like an additional person in the whole communication chain between the city and you. And the architect is able to answer that faster and pull the permits a little bit faster. Now, there is also an aspect where paperwork is involved in the process of obtaining a building permit. Do you have all your contractor licenses on hand? Is the first question. Second question, are all those licenses valid? And do all of them do they have a license that is active with the city of Chicago? Just because somebody gives you a license doesn't mean they're valid. So you want to make sure all of these things before you even interface with the architect. This is pulling permits, a very active process. It involves the client, you as a client, to be just as involved as the architect, because you are responsible for getting all the paperwork arranged and emailed to the architect so that there's very little time for them to go back and forth. So you can do all of these checks yourself and help the architect be a little bit more efficient, and for you to also know that you're working with licensed contractors. So the self-certification program that Jonathan mentioned is a separate program. It runs parallel to the City of Chicago's standard permit review process. What it does is, if you're redoing, let's say I'm building a single family home and I'm doing the same single family home in like 10 locations, why should I spend the same amount of time for every project? So you go to an architect, get the first project certified by a standard process, which means the first project of that prototype is going to be fully evaluated and reviewed by the City of Chicago, and you get a permit. The next time around, when you want to do the same project, all you do is put a different site plan together, and you repeat it again and again and again. And it's very important for Chicago investors to know self-certification is not a way to just get a permit faster. It does that by default, but the real reason why you want a self-certification is you're repeating the same project over and over and again. I was recently in a 3-day seminar that self-certified architects have to go, train for and get certified every 5 years. That's their standard, city required training. The first, and this is an actual slide from the presentation, was a PB&J sandwich. So if your project is as simple as a PB&J sandwich, you can repeat a PB&J sandwich every single time. It's just the same components: a slice of bread, peanut butter, and jelly, again and again and again. So remember that I thought it was a very, powerful slide, because it tells you what the program is about, very simple fashion. If you're going to repeat it something again and again, do it. Now, if you have a complicated rehab project, that's not a candidate for self-certification. So don't even go for a self-certification, because if the architect decides, oh yeah, it's self-certified, I'm charging an extra few bucks and get you a self-certification permit, guess what's going to happen on site? The inspectors come in, they see that logo and it says self-certified on the next to the permit stamp. Right off the bat, they'll drop everything and just go look at every single aspect of your project. If normally they would spend 20 minutes, here they'll spend an hour. So you want to be very careful not to get self-certification projects, or projects self-certified just because they're eligible. You get self-certification primarily because you're repeating something either the architect has already done. Like, for example, I'm speaking openly because there's an architect, John Hanna. John Hanna is one of the top architects in the city who does multi-unit buildings in the city of Chicago. Everybody go to him because he's got these plans already drawn up, and they're asking him to, hey, stamp this here, stamp this then. That's what he does. So there are aspects where self-certification makes sense. There are other times it does not make sense. So make sure you do your due diligence and ask the architect the right questions. Are there any risks involved because of using self-certification for the permit process?
One additional question: what exactly does the permit expediter do?
So as I said, the architects in Chicago, a whole majority of them do not like to get involved beyond the drawings. They want to make sure They get paid for their drawing services and be done with it, right? And have somebody else take care of getting a permit. Now, the permit expediter is a person who is very organized, and these are the qualities to look for if you're dealing with the permit expediter. They're very organized in terms of communication, collecting documents, and dealing with the city of Chicago, and then, staying very, diligent and making sure to keep bugging them constantly until a permit is obtained. Sometimes this permit expediter is very experienced, but they have too many projects going on that they may not have that attention or the time for your project. So you got to be very careful about it. And you want to ask them all these questions, just like you would ask the architect when you go to hire them. So be careful, because the permit expert can help, but they could also treat your project as one of the many projects that they have in their roster. So it could just get delayed. So you want to be very diligent in your communication, and you're hiring the team together for your rehab project or renovation project, whatever it may be. But the permit expert can be very helpful, because they may know certain people in the city of Chicago's different departments that you may not have access to no matter what you do, right? For example, the Department of Transportation is a department you have to deal with sometimes when you want to get a public way permit. You do a project and you're storing building materials on the city's parkway. Well, you need a permit for that, right? Try getting a permit yourself. You will fail. It's very difficult, although they made it easier than what used to be before. So make that hiring decision of hiring a permit expediter based on their expertise and their organizational skills.
Awesome. All right, we're getting close to 12, but let's talk really quick. Easy permits in Chicago, what they are, how they're different from the typical permitting process, and then what you can typically do for renovations for an easy permit. And then the last question I have is, when do you have to call for an inspection if you get an easy permit?
Okay, so a fully loaded question. I'll try and answer. In general, there's a program called Easy Permit Process, EPP, that the city of Chicago allows for you to, like, if you imagine this room, if all you're doing is, taking the drywall off that wall and replacing it, it's a small area, makes sense. You're probably touching a little bit of electrical, the drywall, and then you're done. It's an example of an easy permit process. Now, let's say you want to add a wall and create a separate room in the she shed bar area. Well, that's a problem. Why? Because now there's more things that you've disturbed and more things that have to be evaluated per code, which is light and ventilation, egress. If people were standing there, how do you get out of the room? Now they have double set of doors there. And then, so all of these things become complicated. So easy permit process is just that. It's supposed to be easy. For if I tell you what the scope of work is, by any means, forget the rules. You should be like, oh yeah, that's easy. Okay, I can see that's easy. So you have to be able to explain the scope of work in a few words, not in a big paragraph, right? So that's number one. The easy permit process specifically designed for you to do small work that are non-structural in nature without disturbing the overall use and overall scope. The use has to be unchanged, and you're not adding an element to the existing space, like a wall or a door, or all of those things are immediately. Yes. Yeah, washer dryer, for example, you need gas or you need electric, you need plumbing, you need, so you're automatically touching like 5 trades, right? And you're no longer in the realm of easy permit. Inspections. Although there is no real process for calling for inspections for when you get an easy permit, if you feel like you're doing something way beyond and you might get caught later on, just call for an inspection, okay? But be careful. I'm giving this as an inspector who comes in will not go without saying something defective about your project, right? So you want to make sure that you're 100% confident that you followed the scope of the easy permit down to the word, and there is nothing else in the space that is non-compliant, because the inspector is going to look at that and cite you for it, right? So be careful getting an easy permit. And if you do get an easy permit, be careful or be very confident before you call a city inspector or invite them inside. So these are all things that could easily get you in trouble. So my recommendation is find out if hiring an architect, submitting for drawings is a better option based on the scope of work rather than pulling an easy permit. And these are all questions that the staff at the easy permit desk can call, or you can call them and they can answer for you, or an architect can answer as well and tell you whether what you're trying to do qualifies for an easy permit process.
So stuff like tile, flooring, paint, cabinets, all of that.
Yeah.
Some of them don't even require a permit,
Correct.
actually.
Correct.
If you're replacing fixtures, plumbing, easy permit.
Yeah.
If you're replacing outlets, switches, devices, easy permit, but you need an electrical contractor, I believe.
Correct.
Um,
So anything that is already there and you're just replacing it, that's under the purview of easy permit. Anything that's not there where you're trying to add may not qualify for easy permit. So.
Okay, cool. Andy, do we have any questions online by chance?
We did, but actually Prashant, you answered it.
Okay.
So, you must have knew it.
All right, I have one last question and then we can get off because we're already a little over time, but it's about upzoning. So how long does it typically take to get a zoning change and what's that process?
Sure. So upzoning is when you want to add something that is not, that you cannot add with the current zoning district classification. So you're trying to get another zoning up so that you can add either unit or make a bigger building or make a taller building, right? Or all of the above. The typical process based on the roster of the zoning board or city council board could be, 3 months, as little as 3 months, or as much as 6 months. If you have complications such as neighborhood groups that you want to present to, or the alderman asks you to go present to the neighborhood group just to seek their approval, that will add another month or so for you trying to get in front of them and get their blessing. So you should add a good 6-month time frame. Whether you might get it done much sooner than that, but 6 months is in general a very good time frame for you to add to the overall project duration if there is a zoning change involved. Yeah, and hiring a good zoning attorney is critical. That zoning attorney has to have the experience. There, it's not just expertise, the experience very important because they would know the alderman, they would know the alderman's chief of staff, they would know the local neighborhood group, and most importantly, when they go in front of the zoning board, every member of the zoning board knows the zoning attorney, at least by having done so many appeals in front of them.
6 months unless you're me, right? My zoning change took probably longer than anyone
Right.
ever. Even our zoning attorney, Tom Moore, who's an awesome guy and been doing it forever, said it's probably about the worst zoning permitting issue that he's seen. So I know exactly how the process works, which is a good thing. But yeah, so usually 6 months, unless you get kind of in a goofy situation like I did. Is there any other questions around the room that may have popped up, like from Prashant's answers?
Jonathan, we do have a question. Is Roger your dad?
Roger's my dad.
Yeah.
He's in.
Roger asked when you're coming home for dinner. No, he didn't. He asked, do you think interest rates will increase to rise?
Oh, yes. Yes.
The answer.
Yes. So it's the reality of it, but I feel like we are living in a different time right now. Nobody expected real estate to do so well during the pandemic, but it has. And I also feel very positive about the rest of the year, regardless of the interest rates going up. But, we don't have a crystal ball to look into and see what it's going to look like. There's a lot of geopolitical events and everything's coming together where there would be disturbances, but I feel very confident as a country that, we are able to if you're able to do well in the middle of the worst pandemic ever, why can't we continue doing better when the pandemic's over and we're able to get back to normalcy or whatever that used to look like, right? So interest rates will rise, but I think we'll pivot and we'll continue to make adjustments to continue making returns.
Awesome. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap up. Prashant, thanks again for joining us. He's a super busy man, so super grateful that he took his Saturday morning out to join us. We're going to kind of keep modifying the format. So if you guys want to see different people, insurance agents, cost seg specialists, accountants, whatever you think will provide the most value, like definitely put a post in the Facebook group or in the chat right now and let us know what you guys want to see. Thanks again for everyone who joined us here in person and everyone online.
Thank you.
Yeah.